I was standing in the center of the university auditorium wearing my cap and gown when I saw them together in the third row, my husband leaning into my best friend's ear with that same intimate angle I thought belonged only to us. The ceremony had just begun, and the dean was giving his opening remarks about achievement and new beginnings, while I watched my husband's hand rest on her knee with the casual ownership of someone who had done it 1,000 times before. My diploma suddenly felt like paper in my hands, worthless compared to the education I was receiving in that moment about the man I had supported through his startup while working 2 jobs to put myself through school. She was wearing the earrings I had helped him pick out for her birthday last month, and the way she touched them while smiling at him told me everything about how long this had been going on. The dean called my name, and I walked across that stage with muscle memory alone, while my brain catalogued every late-night meeting, every conference that ran long, every time she had shown up at our house with wine and sympathy when he was traveling. I accepted my diploma and looked directly at them as the audience applauded, watching my husband's face drain of color as he realized I had seen, but I kept my expression neutral and returned to my seat as though nothing in my world had just detonated. After the ceremony ended, he appeared at my side with her trailing behind, both of them wearing carefully constructed faces of celebration, and he kissed my cheek while saying we needed to get to the restaurant for the reservation he had made weeks ago. She hugged me and said she was so proud of me, her perfume the same one I had smelled on his shirts and convinced myself was from the elevator at his office building or a colleague who stood too close. We walked to the parking lot together, and he suggested she ride with us since we were all going to the same place, the audacity of it stealing my breath for just a moment before I agreed with a smile that made his shoulders relax. In the car he drove while she sat in the passenger seat where I should have been on my graduation day, and they made small talk about the ceremony while I sat in the back calculating the value of our joint accounts and remembering that I had never taken his name. The restaurant was one of those expensive places with dim lighting and leather booths, filled with other families celebrating their graduates, and we were seated at a table he had specifically requested weeks ago, according to the hostess who seemed to know him. He ordered champagne and made a toast to my accomplishments while she raised her glass with eyes that wouldn't quite meet mine, and I thanked them both for being there on such an important day. The waiter brought our appetizers, and my husband's phone buzzed on the table, the screen lighting up with a message preview that said, "Can't wait for tonight," with a heart emoji, and I watched him turn it over quickly while clearing his throat. She excused herself to the restroom, and the moment she was gone he leaned forward to tell me we would talk later about something important, his tone suggesting I should be grateful for the timing of this conversation being delayed. I asked him what we needed to talk about, and he said it wasn't the right time, not on my special day, and the condescension in his voice made my decision easy. When she returned, I suggested we take a photo together to remember the occasion, pulling out my phone and opening the camera while positioning us all in frame, then switching to my email and pulling up the draft I had prepared to my attorney 3 days ago when I had first suspected. I had written everything down, including dates and details, attached screenshots of charges to hotels on our joint credit card during times he claimed to be at conferences, and included photos of them I had found on her cloud account that she had carelessly left logged in on my laptop. I added one final line about the discovery at my graduation ceremony, attached the photo I had just taken of the 3 of us smiling, and hit send while placing my phone face down on the table. My husband asked what I was doing, and I told him I was sharing the celebration with someone who would appreciate it. Then I stood and announced I needed to leave because I had another appointment. He started to protest, but I held up my hand and said we would definitely talk later, using his exact words back to him, and the way his face changed told me he understood something had shifted. She began to speak, but I turned to her and said I hoped the earrings brought her as much joy as they had clearly brought him, watching her hand fly up to touch them reflexively before dropping back to her lap. I walked out of that restaurant with my diploma in hand while they sat frozen at the table, and by the time I reached my car my attorney had already responded confirming receipt and asking when I could come in to sign paperwork. The divorce papers were filed before their entrees arrived, and I had transferred my portion of our joint accounts to a new bank by the time they finished dessert. He called 17 times that evening, and she called 32, but I was busy packing what I needed from our house while he was presumably still trying to salvage the dinner reservation. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter next to the iPad where I had queued up the photo album from her cloud, set to display as a slideshow, so he would see it the moment he walked in. My lawyer called the next morning to tell me his attorney had already reached out asking about settlement terms, which told me he knew exactly how much evidence I had and how badly it could damage the reputation he had built in his industry. She sent a text trying to explain that it had just happened and didn't mean anything, which I forwarded to her husband along with several other relevant photos before blocking her number permanently. The story spread through our social circle within 48 hours despite my never saying a word, because apparently someone at the restaurant had recognized us and posted about the dramatic exit, and suddenly everyone was reassessing every couple's dinner and group vacation through a new lens. His business partner called to ask if the rumors were true, and I simply said he should probably ask about the company credit card charges to the hotel downtown, then ended the call before he could ask anything else. I graduated with honors and a degree I had earned entirely on my own, and within a week I had filed for divorce, secured my assets, and cut out every person who had enabled or participated in the deception. The gala invitation arrived 2 months later for the industry event where he was being honored, and I RSVP'd yes with a date, a defamation attorney who happened to be very good-looking and very interested in the documentation I had regarding certain fraudulent expense reports. We arrived dressed impeccably, and I watched my soon-to-be ex-husband's face across the ballroom when he saw me, his new girlfriend conspicuously absent from an event where she would have caused too many questions. During his acceptance speech, he faltered when he reached the part about thanking family and support, and I raised my champagne glass in a mock toast that made several people turn to look. The evening ended with 3 board members asking to speak with me privately about concerns they had regarding financial irregularities, and I provided them with copies of everything my attorney had deemed shareable. The divorce was finalized 4 months after my graduation with a settlement that reflected both his guilt and his desperation to keep certain information private, and I used part of it to fund a scholarship for non-traditional students who were working their way through school. She lost her husband and most of her friend group, he lost his marriage and nearly lost his business, and I gained my freedom and the knowledge that my instincts had been right all along. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people experience the natural consequences of their choices while you walk away with your dignity and your assets intact, and the last I heard they weren't even together anymore because apparently relationships built on deception don't have strong foundations. I never posted about it on social media or told my side of the story publicly because I didn't need to. The facts spoke loudly enough on their own, and now when I see my diploma on the wall, I remember it as the day I graduated from more than just university. The scholarship fund I established became more successful than I anticipated, and within a year I was invited to speak at the same university where everything had unraveled, standing at the same podium where the dean had called my name while my world collapsed in the 3rd row. The irony wasn't lost on me as I looked out at the audience of students and saw my ex-husband sitting near the back, apparently invited as an alumnus donor, though his contributions had mysteriously decreased according to the development office coordinator who briefed me before the event. He had brought a date who looked young enough to make people uncomfortable, and I watched him whisper something to her during my introduction, probably some version of the story that painted him as the victim of a vindictive ex-wife. I spoke about perseverance and the importance of recognizing when something in your life isn't serving you anymore, about having the courage to walk away from investments that have turned toxic, whether they're financial or personal, and several people in the audience nodded while looking directly at him. During the reception afterward, he approached me with his hand extended as though we were casual acquaintances, and he said it was good to see me doing so well, while his eyes assessed my designer suit and the confidence I wore more comfortably than I had ever worn my wedding ring. I shook his hand with the firm grip my negotiation coach had taught me and told him I was grateful for everything I had learned from our marriage, especially the lessons about due diligence and reading fine print. His date wandered over and introduced herself as someone who worked at his company, and the way she said it made me understand she had no idea about his history or the pattern she was stepping into. I excused myself to speak with a student who had questions about the scholarship application, but not before mentioning loudly enough for others to hear that the fund specifically supported people leaving difficult situations to pursue education and independence. My former best friend had apparently moved to another state after her divorce, and I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had tried to reach out several times through intermediary friends asking if we could talk. The requests came through people who didn't know the full story, who thought maybe enough time had passed for reconciliation, and I simply told them I had moved forward and wasn't interested in excavating the past for someone else's closure. She had written a letter that someone forwarded to me despite my wishes, full of explanations about loneliness and mistakes and how she had never meant to hurt me, and I deleted it without reading past the first paragraph because her intentions were irrelevant compared to her actions. The mutual friends who had suggested I was overreacting or that I should consider forgiveness gradually stopped appearing in my life, and I realized they had been accessories to my diminishment all along, people who preferred comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. My attorney became a genuine friend after the divorce was finalized, and over drinks one evening she told me about 3 other wives who had reached out asking if I would speak with them about their suspicions regarding their own husbands. I met with each of them and shared not advice but resources, the names of forensic accountants and private investigators and attorneys who understood that divorce wasn't failure but sometimes the bravest form of success. 2 of them filed within 6 months, and the third decided to stay, but renegotiated her prenuptial agreement from a position of knowledge rather than blind trust, and all of them thanked me for treating their intelligence with respect. The business partner who had called me during the divorce reached out again 18 months later to tell me they had dissolved the partnership after discovering the expense report fraud went deeper than anyone had initially realized. He asked if I had known about all of it, and I told him I had known my husband was capable of lying about important things, which had made me wonder what else he might lie about, and that curiosity had led to some interesting discoveries. He laughed and said he wished he had been as smart as I was, and I corrected him by saying I wished I had been as smart earlier, but that timing was everything in learning life's most valuable lessons. The company folded completely 6 months after that, and I heard through industry contacts that my ex-husband had taken a position at a smaller firm in a different city, essentially starting over professionally, while I was being invited to join boards and speak at conferences. His LinkedIn profile no longer mentioned his marriage or his previous company's achievements, and the photo showed him looking older than his years, the stress of consequences aging him in ways that wealth couldn't hide. I ran into the young woman who had been his date at the university event completely by chance at a coffee shop, and she was sitting alone working on a laptop with an expression I recognized from my own face years earlier. She looked up and recognized me immediately, and something in her eyes told me she had learned things since that reception, that the pattern had revealed itself the way patterns always do. I didn't approach her, but I left my business card with the barista along with payment for whatever she ordered, and on the back I had written the name and number of my attorney along with a single word that said simply, "When." She called 3 weeks later, and I met her for coffee at a different shop, and I listened while she told me a story that sounded remarkably like mine, except the details involved a different wedding venue and a different best friend. I shared nothing about my own experience except to say I understood, and that she deserved better than wondering if she was crazy for noticing inconsistencies, and by the end of our conversation she was sitting straighter and speaking with more certainty about what she needed to do. She thanked me and asked why I had helped her when I didn't know her, and I told her that women who have escaped fires have a responsibility to point out smoke to those still inside. My ex-husband's second engagement announcement appear.